I'm an Apple fanboy myself, but when it comes to development, I wish Apple invests more resources on their developer toolchains. There are a lot of things I can talk about, but for today, let me focus on one example that shows how much Apple does not seem to care about their developer tools. That is, disk I/O speed using C++ standard is very slow running on a Mac platform. So much slow that a program running inside a Docker container runs much faster than the same program running natively on the host. I can assure you this is not the physical hardware limitation. If I use C standard I/O library instead, I get much better speed. Alright, enough talking and let me actually show you this issue. So I have a simple C++ program here called iostream. All it does is read in input line by line and print it out line by line. In doing so, it uses the C++ standard iostream and fstream. First, I made sure to turn off the sync with standard I/O to use buffered streams. It takes two optional arguments that correspond to input and output files. Then I create input and output streams in the most generic way. And I read the input stream line by line and simply write it out to the output stream. So this is the most generic way and the standard C++ way of doing this. To test this program, I have an input file here called text, which I got it from IMDb dataset. The file is roughly 800 megabytes in size and consists of about 10 million lines of pure text. So let me first compile this with GCC version 12. I'm going to turn on optimization and will output as an executable named iostream. If I run this, it takes about 3 seconds to complete on my M1 Mac. I can verify that the output is identical to the input. Now, what I'm going to do is essentially clone this program, but this time I will use standard I/O library from C rather than iostream from C++. So I replace iostream and fstream with standard I/O and string library. And I use fopen in place of ifstream. And I adopt the C version of getLine and write with fwrite. And finally, close the files and free the buffer. Okay, let me compile this with the same optimization flag and with GCC 12 as before. It takes about half the time compared to iostream. So this definitely tells us something is way off. Yes, the C++ iostream is heavier than standard I/O and maybe a bit slower, but not by twice as much. I can verify that the outputs are identical, meaning that both programs are doing exactly the same thing. For more detailed analysis on running time, there is an excellent program called Hyperfine. With this, I can easily do performance comparison of the two programs with repeated runs, and it outputs useful statistics. As you can see here, the standard I/O version runs about 2.2 times faster than the iostream version. This is just crazy. Alright, let me repeat the same test again, but this time with Clang instead of GCC. I'll compile the two programs with Clang and run Hyperfine. This time, standard I/O runs 2.6 times faster. This is even worse than GCC. If you have a different version of Mac, perhaps running Intel x86 or even PowerPC, try this experiment and see what you get. I'll share the code in the description below. Alright, I'm going to repeat this experiment in a Docker container running inside this Mac host and see what happens. I'll run the container, copy the source code, and recompile inside the container. This time, let's try Clang first. The result? Standard I/O runs still faster, but only by 15%. Remember that iostream took 3 seconds to run natively on macOS? That means it runs twice faster on the container than natively. Quite amazing. I can repeat this with GCC, and that gives me essentially the same result. I don't know how else I can explain this other than to say that Apple has done a very poor job optimizing iostream library on macOS. So, dear Apple, please fix this issue. If you agree that Apple needs to address this issue, please thumbs up to help this video reach Apple.